My dear child. Last night, while you were living an ordinary moment, someone else's heart was anything but ordinary. Your name escaped their lips more than once, not because they planned to say it, but because something deep inside them refused to stay silent. They tried to change the subject, they laughed, they acted as if everything was normal, yet somehow the conversation kept finding its way back to you. They don't even fully understand why your presence has become so impossible to ignore. And what they said after speaking your name, that is the part they never imagined heaven would allow you to know. But before that hidden conversation can be revealed, you must first understand why your spirit has been reaching them in ways neither of you can explain. There are moments when heaven begins moving long before human eyes can recognize the signs. What feels like coincidence to the world is often the quiet unfolding of divine timing. You have been wondering why certain thoughts keep returning, why familiar memories suddenly appear without invitation, why your heart has felt both peaceful and restless at the same time. Those feelings were never meaningless. They were gentle echoes of a connection that was already awakening somewhere beyond your sight. The person whose heart carries your name has been fighting a quiet battle within themselves. They have tried to convince themselves that what they feel is temporary, that it will fade with time, that distance or distraction will erase the emotions growing inside them. Yet every attempt has only led them back to the same place, back to you. And last night, something shifted. Without planning it, they found themselves speaking about your kindness. Then they mentioned your strength. A simple conversation became something much deeper. The people around them may have thought they were only sharing memories, but their soul was revealing far more than their words could express. What they don't realize is that every sincere word spoken from the heart carries weight in the unseen places. When your name was spoken with honesty, it became more than a conversation. It became a quiet acknowledgement of what their spirit has been trying to accept for a long time. But there is another detail they have told no one. As they continued talking, there was one memory that suddenly returned so vividly it caught them completely off guard. They paused in the middle of speaking, almost as if they were reliving that moment all over again. Even they couldn't explain why it felt so important. That memory was never random. Sometimes heaven allows one single memory to rise above thousands of others because it carries the answer the heart has been searching for. While they were speaking, they began seeing you differently, not through old misunderstandings, not through fear, but through clarity that had been missing until now. Still, they remained silent about the deepest part. Not because they wanted to hide it. Because admitting it would change everything. My child. There are seasons when people are prepared through quiet reflection before they are prepared through action. Words often come before courage. Conversations often come before decisions. And hearts often awaken long before lives begin to change. That is why you must not become discouraged by what you cannot yet see. The unseen work is often the most important work of all. Even now, while you are listening to these words, unseen pieces are still moving into place. Questions are forming in their heart that they can no longer ignore. Feelings they once dismissed are becoming impossible to explain away. They are beginning to realize that every attempt to move forward without understanding this connection has only brought them back to the same truth. But the most surprising part of last night's conversation has not yet been revealed. There was one sentence they spoke, quietly, almost under their breath. Believing no one would truly notice its meaning. Yet heaven noticed. And that single sentence revealed far more about the future than they ever intended. What those words were, and why they may change everything from this moment forward, is only beginning to unfold. A single sentence, spoken almost as a whisper, has a way of lingering long after every other word has faded. Last night, that quiet sentence did not disappear into the air. It echoed in a place far deeper than the ears of those who heard it. The person who spoke it tried to move on immediately, pretending it meant nothing, but their own heart would not let them escape its meaning. And hidden inside those few simple words was a truth they have been avoiding for far longer than they realize. They did not say your name out of obligation. They did not speak about you to impress anyone. Something within them simply reached its limit. The emotions they had carefully organized, the thoughts they had locked away, the questions they kept postponing, all began to rise together. Have you ever noticed how the deepest feelings rarely arrive with noise? They come quietly. They appear in unexpected conversations, in ordinary evenings, in moments when no one is trying to make a grand confession. That is exactly how heaven often begins revealing what the human heart has hidden from itself. As they continued talking, someone nearby casually asked another question about you. It seemed insignificant, almost forgettable. Yet instead of giving a short answer, they paused. That pause revealed everything. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than explanation. Within those few seconds, they remembered things they had tried not to think about. They remembered your resilience, your patience, the quiet strength you carried even when life demanded more than seemed fair. For the first time in a long while, they stopped seeing only isolated memories. They began seeing the entire picture. And suddenly they realized something that unsettled them. You had left a much deeper mark on their life than they had ever admitted. Not because of dramatic moments. Not because of perfect circumstances. But because your presence had quietly become part of the way they viewed hope itself. This realization surprised them. It challenged the story they had been telling themselves. For so long they believed that moving forward meant leaving certain emotions behind. Yet last night proved something completely different. The farther they tried to walk from those feelings, the more honestly they began speaking about you. That contradiction could no longer be ignored. My child, divine timing often works this way. It does not force hearts open. It gently removes every excuse that has kept them closed. While they were speaking, another unexpected feeling entered the conversation. Gratitude. Not the kind people express out of politeness. But the quiet gratitude that appears when someone suddenly recognizes the value of a person they once took for granted. They may never have planned to say it aloud. Yet their words carried appreciation that even surprised them. And that appreciation became the beginning of something much greater. Because gratitude has a remarkable way of transforming fear into courage. Still, there remains one hidden detail they have not fully faced. Near the end of that conversation, everyone else slowly moved on to another subject. The discussion changed. The laughter continued. The evening carried on. But their minds stayed with you. Even while speaking about completely different things. They kept drifting back to the same unanswered question. Why can't I stop thinking about them? That question has now become impossible for them to silence. And once a sincere question reaches the heart, heaven often begins preparing an answer. Do not mistake this season for inactivity. Some of the greatest changes begin internally, long before they become visible externally. Right now, unseen walls are beginning to crack. Old assumptions are weakening. Misunderstandings are losing their power. The certainty they once had about keeping emotional distance is no longer as strong as it was only days ago. They may still appear calm on the outside. But inside, everything is quietly being rearranged. Yet there is one final moment from last night that has not been revealed. It lasted only a few seconds. No one else recognized its importance. But in that brief moment, they almost admitted something they have never spoken aloud to anyone. They stopped themselves just before the truth escaped. And what nearly came out of their mouth may explain everything that is about to happen next. There is a reason some truths stop at the edge of the lips, not because they are untrue, but because the heart realizes that once they are spoken, life can never return to what it was before. Last night, your person stood at that very edge. For one breathtaking moment, honesty was closer than fear. And although the words remained unspoken, heaven saw the confession that existed long before it ever became a sentence. My child, There are conversations that people remember for years, not because of everything that was said, but because of the one thing that wasn't. That unfinished confession has followed them since the moment the conversation ended. As the room grew quieter and everyone began returning to their own lives, they smiled politely, they nodded, they acted as though nothing unusual had happened. But inside, another conversation had already begun. One that no one else could hear. They started asking themselves questions they had avoided for far too long. Why do they still matter to me? Why does every memory still feel alive? Why does speaking their name bring both peace and longing at the same time? Those questions were not signs of confusion. They were signs of awakening. Because before the heart accepts an important truth, it often wrestles with it. That struggle is not weakness. It is preparation. Think about the sunrise. The darkest part of the night comes just before the first light appears. In the same way, clarity often arrives only after the heart has spent enough time searching through uncertainty. Your person is entering that season now. Without realizing it, they are beginning to see your story through new eyes. They remember moments they once overlooked. Small acts of kindness. Quiet sacrifices. Conversations they didn't fully appreciate at the time. Details that seemed ordinary then, now carry extraordinary meaning. It is amazing how heaven can use memory. Not to trap someone in the past, but to reveal what was always valuable. And each memory is gently removing another layer of doubt. Yet something even more surprising happened after they were finally alone. The noise of the evening disappeared. The conversations ended. The distractions faded. Silence filled the room. Many people fear silence because it leaves them alone with their thoughts. But heaven often speaks most clearly there. In that quiet moment, your name returned once again. Not spoken aloud this time. Only carried within the deepest place of their heart. They closed their eyes for just a moment. And an unexpected feeling washed over them. It wasn't regret alone. It wasn't hope alone. It was the realization that some connections refused to disappear because they were never built on temporary emotions. They were built on something much deeper. Something that continues to call the heart back, even after every logical reason says it should have moved on. My child, never underestimate what quiet reflection can accomplish. Many lives change without applause. Many decisions begin in complete silence. Long before anyone takes a visible step, they first surrender inwardly. That invisible surrender has already begun. Perhaps not completely. But enough that they can no longer pretend everything is the same. Every passing hour makes the truth harder to ignore. Every memory carries greater meaning. Every unanswered feeling grows stronger instead of weaker. And while they may not fully understand why this transformation is happening, heaven does. Because there are seasons when hearts are gently aligned before paths are ever crossed again. But one final mystery remains hidden. Just before they fell asleep, one unexpected thought entered their mind with unusual clarity. It arrived so suddenly that even they wondered where it came from. They tried to dismiss it. Yet it refused to leave. That single thought may become the very reason their next decision changes the direction of both your journeys. And what that thought revealed is only beginning to unfold. Just before sleep claimed their thoughts, something unexpected interrupted the silence. It wasn't a loud voice, it wasn't a dramatic sign, it was a quiet realization that appeared so naturally they almost overlooked it. Yet the moment it arrived, their heart became completely still. Some truths don't ask for attention, they simply settle into the soul until they can no longer be denied. And this truth carried your presence with it in a way they never expected. My child. There are nights when the mind finally stops arguing with what the heart has known all along. For a long time, they searched for reasons to explain away every emotion connected to you. They called it coincidence. They called it nostalgia. They called it curiosity. But last night, those explanations began to lose their power. Because no temporary feeling continues to return with such quiet persistence. No passing thought leaves such lasting peace. No ordinary memory keeps finding its way back after so much time. Little by little, they began to understand that what they had been resisting was not merely a memory. It was a truth waiting patiently to be recognized. As they reflected on everything that had been said that evening, they noticed something remarkable. Every time your name entered the conversation, their voice changed. It softened. It slowed. There was a gentleness that could not be forced or rehearsed. No one around them may have understood why. But heaven understood. For the heart often reveals itself through the smallest details long before it speaks through bold declarations. Then another realization quietly unfolded. They remembered a moment when you encouraged someone without expecting anything in return. It seemed insignificant at the time. Yet now that memory shone brighter than many larger events. They began to see that what drew them toward you was not perfection. It was authenticity. Your ability to remain kind when life became difficult. Your quiet strength when others expected you to give up. Your willingness to keep believing even when no one applauded your faith. Those qualities cannot be easily forgotten. They become part of the way another soul remembers hope. My child, never believe that genuine goodness disappears unnoticed. Heaven sees every unseen act. And sometimes, the greatest impact you leave on someone's life is through moments you barely remember yourself. That is why your influence has continued to grow within them. Not through dramatic gestures, but through countless quiet moments that slowly shaped the way they see the world. Now they find themselves comparing every new experience to the peace they once felt whenever thoughts of you appeared. This comparison is not something they planned. It simply happens. And with each passing day, it becomes harder for them to convince themselves that your place in their heart is ordinary. Still, one final barrier remains. It is not distance. It is not time. It is the fear of vulnerability. They know that honesty has the power to change everything. They know that one sincere conversation could open a completely different chapter. But they also know that honesty requires courage. And courage is often born quietly. One decision at a time. Do not lose heart while that courage is still growing. Seeds do not become trees overnight. The sunrise does not rush the dawn. Divine timing is never hurried, yet it is never late. Even now, unseen confidence is taking root within them. The questions that once filled them with uncertainty are slowly becoming convictions. The hesitation that once kept them silent is beginning to weaken. Something within them is preparing to choose openness over fear. And there is one last detail from that unforgettable night that has remained hidden until now. Before they finally closed their eyes, they made a silent promise to themselves. No one else heard it. No one else knew it was made. But heaven did. And that quiet promise has already set events into motion that neither of you can fully see yet. Because the moment that promise is tested, everything they have kept hidden inside may finally come into the light. A promise made in silence often carries more power than words spoken before a crowd, because it is not made to impress anyone. It is made in the secret place where only the heart and heaven bear witness. Last night, when your person closed their eyes, they believed that promise belonged to them alone. But what is spoken sincerely within the soul is never hidden from the one who sees every unseen beginning. And that quiet promise has already started changing them from the inside out. My child, change rarely announces itself. It begins with one small decision. One honest thought. One moment when a person finally becomes tired of pretending that their heart feels nothing. That is where your person now stands. For so long, they believed that silence would protect them. If they said nothing, they could avoid disappointment. If they admitted nothing, they would never have to face uncertainty. But silence has its own weight. And carrying that weight has become more exhausting than speaking the truth. That is why the promise they made was so important. It was not a promise about perfection. It was not a promise that everything would suddenly become easy. It was a promise that they would stop running from what their own heart has been trying to reveal. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not that circumstances change overnight. It is that a heart finally becomes willing to change first. As that willingness grows, something else begins to happen. The fears that once looked enormous slowly begin to shrink. The excuses that once sounded convincing lose their voice. The walls that took years to build begin to crack. Not because someone forced them down, but because love, truth, and grace are stronger than fear. Have you noticed how light never argues with darkness? It simply appears. And darkness has no choice but to give way. That is how divine clarity works. It does not fight confusion with noise. It quietly replaces it with peace. Your person has started experiencing that peace in unexpected moments. While walking. While sitting alone. While completing ordinary tasks. Thoughts of you arrive, not with anxiety, but with a calm certainty they cannot explain. They are beginning to understand that some connections are not meant to be forgotten. Some people enter our lives not simply to create memories, but to transform us. And whether they fully recognize it yet or not, you have been part of that transformation. Not because you tried to change them, but because your presence awakened qualities within them they did not know were still alive. Hope, compassion, patience, the courage to believe that meaningful connections still exist. Those gifts continue to grow inside them, even when no one else can see it. My child, never underestimate what heaven can accomplish through quiet preparation. While people often look for dramatic signs, heaven is often working through gentle moments that slowly reshape the heart. Every unseen lesson, every unexpected memory, every peaceful reflection, has been preparing them for a choice they can no longer avoid. Soon they will realize that waiting for the perfect moment is only another form of hesitation. The perfect moment is not something they must find. It is something they must create through faith and honesty. That realization is drawing closer with every passing day. Yet one final piece of this unfolding story remains hidden. The promise they made last night was followed by something they did not expect. A deep sense of peace settled over them. Not because every answer had arrived, but because, for the first time in a long while, they stopped resisting what their heart had been trying to tell them. And when someone stops resisting the truth, the next step often appears sooner than anyone imagines. What that next step will be, and why it may bring two paths closer than either of you expected, is the revelation that is about to unfold next. The next step never begins with a loud announcement, it begins with a quiet moment when fear loses its grip. That moment is closer than your person realizes. They may still appear unchanged to the outside world, but inside, a new chapter has already begun. Heaven often prepares the heart in secret so that, when the time comes, the step forward feels less like a risk, and more like the only path that still brings peace. My child. There is a beautiful difference between forcing an outcome and trusting divine timing. One is driven by anxiety. The other is guided by faith. Your person is slowly leaving behind the need to control every possibility. For so long, they searched for certainty before taking a step. But now they are discovering something deeper. Courage does not come after every question is answered. Courage grows when the heart decides that truth is more valuable than comfort. That realization has been quietly unfolding ever since last night's conversation. The words they spoke about you did more than express a feeling. They revealed a direction. Without realizing it, they opened a door they had kept closed for far too long. Now every quiet moment seems to invite them back to the same place. Back to the same memories. Back to the same questions. Back to the same hope. And each return feels less like coincidence. And more like purpose. My child, there are seasons when heaven gently reminds people of what truly matters. Not through dramatic signs. But through peaceful certainty. The kind that remains even after emotions settle. The kind that still whispers when the world becomes quiet. That whisper has become familiar to them now. It reminds them of conversations they once treasured. Of laughter that still echoes in their memory. Of moments that seemed ordinary then, but now shine with unexpected meaning. They have begun to understand that what they valued most was never the perfect circumstances. It was the connection itself. A connection that encouraged growth. A connection that inspired hope. A connection that quietly changed both hearts in ways neither fully recognized at the time. And perhaps the greatest surprise of all is that they no longer wish to hide from that realization. They are beginning to accept it with gratitude instead of resistance. That shift changes everything. Because once the heart accepts the truth, the path ahead becomes much clearer. It does not mean every challenge disappears. It means fear no longer has the final word. My child, if you have been wondering whether unseen prayers are heard, whether quiet hopes are noticed, whether sincere love can still find its way through uncertainty, remember this. Heaven is never absent from the moments that seem silent. Sometimes the greatest answers are being prepared while nothing appears to be happening at all. Trust the season you are in. Continue walking with kindness. Protect your peace. Let hope remain stronger than doubt. What is meant to grow will not be diminished by waiting. What is guided by divine wisdom will arrive at the right moment, carrying lessons, healing, and joy that rushed timing could never produce. And as this message comes to its close, hold one final thought close to your heart. Last night was not important simply because your name was spoken. It was important because a heart that had been holding back finally began telling itself the truth. That quiet beginning may seem small today. But many extraordinary journeys begin with one honest conversation, one sincere promise, and one heart that is finally willing to listen. So walk forward with peace, my child. The story that heaven is writing is still unfolding. And sometimes the most beautiful chapters are the ones that begin after someone finally has the courage to speak your name, and understand why they never truly stopped.